It was a very long week, very emotional week. It was hard emotionally and sometimes physically, mostly sitting in the hard chairs. I admit my back hurt a little bit this morning. But what we want to emphasize how different these past 20 months could have been had the investigation been handled properly at the start. We want to begin with Magnus because it was his life that was stolen. He was our boy. He was our beautiful, beautiful boy and brother, older brother to Arrow. Our son Magnus knew he wanted to be a professional cyclist in 6th grade. I don't know, he was our first, so I was a little surprised at 6th grade he knew what he was wanting to be, but he stuck to it. He stuck to what he knew he was going to do. He pursued it. He dedicated his life, his time to his sport of cycling. When he rode his bike, it was beautiful to watch. It was hard to tell where the heave started and stopped and the bike began, and as Quentin, one of the witnesses, said, and that's when I got really mostly emotional, is when he described him on his bike, how when you saw him, you knew he was comfortable on that bike. And he was distinct when he rode. And I know so many people saw him riding that day on July 29th, on that beautiful July day. Magnus, it's a little thing. I never understood it, but he was always afraid to be alone. He was kind of afraid of the dark. He was kind of the same way on his bike. He never wanted to be in the back. He never wanted to be alone in the back. So he always made his way to the front. He was a leader on the bike. He was a leader off the bike. So many of his friends just looked up to him and considered him a best friend. I think what's hardest most for me as his mom, knowing that in 6th grade he wanted to be a professional cyclist, that on July 29th, it was going to be his second to last training ride before he went on to the World Championships in Scotland to race for the US. It was one of his dreams to finally be selected for the USA national team for mountain biking. And before he was hit and killed, he had conversations with a UK-based professional cycling team. He was on his way to get that dream that he saw for himself in 6th grade. The best thing about Magnus, one of them, there's a lot, but he loved his car. He loved driving in his car. When he went on rides, he'd pick out routes to go back to on his car. Four-wheeling. He was a teenager, stretched his curfew, by a few minutes. He always said, "Sorry, Mom." He maintained a 4.2 GPA. That was him. It was all him. He always wanted to go back to California, and he knew, anyway, sidetrack. He knew he had to do well to get to California school. So it's been over 20 months since we saw my son, our son, Arrow's brother. Last time, 20 months since we saw his smile in person. One thing I did when he would go to sleep or when he was going to bed, I would always rub his feet. I did that day in the hospital. I rubbed his feet. Today, the jury found the driver guilty of felony vehicular homicide for killing our son. I believe that was the right verdict for this case. This conviction is a small step forward. Accountability. Whatever sentence this driver receives is not enough. It'll be somewhere between 2 and 6 years, and I'm not a lawyer. I think it's non-mandatory. She may never spend time a single day in prison. This verdict acknowledges what we have known all along. Magnus's death was not an accident, it was a crime. On July 29th, 2023, the driver made a series of choices. She stayed up all night. She took prescription drugs. She drank half a bottle of whiskey until well into the morning. And then she got behind the wheel of her car. Video footage introduced at trial shows the driver drinking whiskey until 6 in the morning. A closer look at that same video shows lines of cocaine on a mirror right in front of her. And in court, the court ruled that those drugs could not be discussed in front of a jury. Evidence that that they were never allowed to consider. The text messages she sent that morning were to a friend looking for cocaine, presumably to wake herself up. She never found any, and once again, the court ruled that evidence could not be allowed.
The driver didn't just fall asleep. She blacked out while driving. And we learned from her own text messages that this wasn't the first time. But this time she swerved across the road and hit our son from behind, going 60 miles per hour. His body flew 30 feet into the air. She never touched the brakes. She kept driving off the road for nearly 300 feet until a fence stopped her car. At the crash scene, she blamed her car's steering. 5 months later, talking to investigators at the DA's office, she was still blaming her car. She admitted at the crash scene she was drinking that morning. She lied about how much she drank. She lied about when she drank. She lied about the time she took her prescription drugs. She lied to police. She lied to investigators. She lied about being a refugee. She has shown no remorse. She has taken no responsibility, not until she had to, on the stand in court 615 days after she killed Magnus. Magnus had never broken a bone in his life until she broke his pelvis, until she broke his collarbone, and until she shattered his skull. Make no mistake, that driver killed Magnus. But the trial revealed something else. A systemic failure by those whose job it is to protect the public. 3 agencies responded to the crash that day: the city police, the county sheriff, and the state patrol. The agency with jurisdiction arrived last, and they were critically understaffed with just 1 officer controlling the scene. Protocols were not followed when a child is killed by a driver. Eyewitnesses said the driver had been swerving onto the shoulder multiple times before hitting Magnus. She admitted she had been drinking. She said she blacked out and didn't know what happened. And yet not a single officer requested a sobriety test or a blood draw. They even let the driver remove items from the scene. Critical evidence was lost forever. She didn't fall asleep. She blacked out behind the wheel. And still, she was never drug tested. But Magnus was. State trooper visited us at the hospital later that day as we held on to the last moments of our son's life. We thought she would tell us they were investigating the driver who killed our son. And instead, we were told the driver did everything right. It was incredibly hurtful and left us wondering if Magnus's death was even being taken seriously. This verdict says more about the system than it does about the crime. The driver's actions weren't a mistake. They were a series of deliberate choices. Magnus deserved a full investigation of the truth. He deserved to have every possibility pursued and discussed, not ignored. And while today's verdict acknowledges a level of recklessness, it can't undo the consequences of a system that failed to do its job from the start. Sadly, we've learned that we are not alone. Through countless families we've met, this happens every day across the state, across this country, and that needs to change. We're speaking out because our family has experienced a loss no other should have to endure, and because silence allows it to keep happening to others. Every failure we ignore puts another life at risk. Our goal is to drive conversations and push for real action. Laws must evolve, protocols must be strengthened, law enforcement training must reflect the gravity of what's at stake. A mandatory blood draw must be the standard, not the option, in all fatal and serious injury crashes. We are grateful to the Boulder County District Attorney's Office for their tireless work in bringing this case to trial. To those who have stood by us in our grief, in our fight for accountability, we thank you. Please continue to walk with us. Speak Magnus's name. And stand with every family whose loved one was stolen from them by a reckless or careless driver. We will never stop missing our Magnus, and we will never stop fighting for him. Thank you. Yes. Yeah, thank you.
Can I ask a question of the attorneys?
Sure.
Can I ask you to elaborate on the 2017 residency?
Yes, so first I'll say my name is Michael Doherty. I'm the district attorney. It has been an honor to fight for justice for Magnus White, for his family, for his many loved ones, and for this community. I'm really grateful to the team we have from the district attorney's office. It has been a privilege to walk this journey with the White family since day one and to fight for justice. I also want to thank the jurors and the court staff and the judge who worked well into the night tonight to make sure that they were able to return the right verdict. And it's after 10 o'clock now. A week ago, these jurors had no idea they'd be working on this case. And they obviously put a tremendous amount of time and work into it and into reaching the right outcome. And I'm very grateful to them for their service and very appreciative of the fact that they reached the right and just outcome based on the evidence. And this defendant is going to be held responsible for killing Magnus White. To answer your question, we had evidence that the defense was aware of that she had become a permanent resident in the country in 2017. She was cross-examined on that, admitted that was true, which is obviously a contradiction to what had been said when she testified on direct about coming to the United States for the first time as a result of the war in Ukraine in 2022. So we had a permanent resident card showing that she became a resident in the U.S. in 2017.
Had she stayed in the U.S. since 2017?
I don't have all the details of that, but we have that card that clearly shows when she arrived as a permanent resident.
And then I also wanted to ask a question about People's Exhibit 84, which was mentioned several times outside of the presence of the jury. Why wasn't certain evidence admitted into the trial, and what do you believe that evidence showed?
So what I would say is in every trial, the court has the job of trying to balance what evidence is relevant and probative and what the prosecution should be able to provide to the jury so the jury can reach the right decision. The court also has to balance giving the defendant a fair trial. I don't agree with every decision that judges make in every trial, I recognize why that evidence was particularly compelling. That's why we asked for it to be admitted. But as I stand here right now, I am just especially grateful that we got the guilty verdict on vehicular homicide. That was absolutely the right thing, and I'm glad we were able to work through to get there.
Did CSP make your job harder in this case?
I stand by what I said in court yesterday when Colorado State Patrol had folks on the stand, and the White family and I have had very direct conversations with Colorado State Patrol about this particular case.
Are there going to be changes made in how CSP responds to crashes?
I think the testimony that you heard yesterday reflects that at the time there were definitely changes that need to be made, and I would encourage you to reach out to Colorado State Patrol, because I think when you look at the looks on their faces here, this is something where we want State Patrol to have all the resources and support they need to prevent these crashes from happening, to prevent further deaths, to protect cyclists, pedestrians, and everyone on the roads, and also then to investigate fatal crashes. And I know there's a lot of hardworking people at CSP who want to see that happen, and I encourage you to follow up with them about that.
Jill said she wasn't sure about a punitive sentence. What sentencing options are on the table?
Thank you for your question, Nikki. So, under the law in Colorado, the sentencing range for vehicular homicide is a presumptive sentence of 2 to 6 years in state prison. Presumptive means it's also probation eligible. That's the current range in the state of Colorado for vehicular homicide. Okay. So I will just say, I appreciate all of you being here. I really do. I think it's really important that we call attention to Magnus and lift him up and to honor his memory, but also to support this family and to let the community know how devastating these cases are. So I know you're members of the media and this is your job, but I really appreciate you being here and sticking through the entire evening as well. So thank you for being here. Thanks.